Well, let's get started. Hi, good evening, everybody that's joining us online. My name is Kelly Burns. I'm the City of Ashland Emergency Manager. I was formerly with Ashland Fire and Rescue as a battalion chief and paramedic for 31 years plus. I was the initial incident commander of the Almeda fire. And post that event and the Obanchain fires and all of our bigger fires that keep growing and turning into campaigns, I wanted to do a little more. So I've gotten into emergency management, and that's led me to trying to expand our city's capabilities to like reach out to other agencies so that we can all learn from each other. Um, Tonight, with the help of our wildfire division from Ashland Fire and Rescue and Brian Hendricks, who's in the room with us, he's under the Ashland Wildfire Division sign there. We've invited and have been offered by Boise State University to come and teach us a little bit about how to protect our homes in wildfire, because August is going to come again. We're going to have another fire season, and one of the most important things that we can do to survive that and to keep living on the West Coast, I don't know about you, but I want to keep doing that, is doing some work to harden our homes. Now, our friends, Dr. Brittany Brand and Ashley Boza, are both here from BSU, and they have a really engaging program on how to look at it and stuff too. I know there's a lot of resources out there. Brian and his team teach this locally. Our RAP volunteers also teach some of this, but I think you should really pay attention to BSU's presentation tonight. I think you're going to enjoy it. And so without further, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Brand and Ashley Boza.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelly. And thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. So we are with the Boise State Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute, and our mission really is to foster community resilience. So one of the things we do is that we design hazard workshops for communities that are really place-based. And so this is designed to be super interactive and engaging, but it's also designed specifically for you in the city of Ashland. So to get started, the first thing, just to share some of the workshop goals, this is what we hope by the end of the workshop you will take away. You will understand wildfire hazards. You will get a better understanding of what living with wildfire means for you, your home, your property, your family, your neighbors. How taking action now can help protect you and your property and your neighborhood. And we'll finish by setting some goals to protect your home. So that's what's coming up tonight. We've got a lot to cover in an hour. I want this to be interactive. I know I can see some of you, so you're welcome to keep your cameras on because that's really lovely to see your faces. If you'd prefer to keep them off, that's fine as well. If you have questions throughout, you can put them in the chat. And I do want this to be interactive, so I will be asking you to speak up if you feel comfortable, or add things to the chat as we go along. So to get started, the first thing we're going to have you do is pull out a piece of paper and a pencil. And all I want you to do is draw your property boundary, and any structure on your property. And so, for example, this is a map of my yard here. And you can see this is my property boundary through here. This is my house. This is my driveway, which is about 30 feet long. It's kind of nice to put a scale, especially if you kind of have a sense or like a guesstimate of what 30 feet is. That'll be helpful for later. I've got a storage shed back here that's wood and a back porch. And you don't have to draw in all of the details right now. We are going to get to those later. Right now, the best thing to do is just draw, to the best of your ability, your property boundary and any structures on your property. So again, if you're just coming in, because I know people are trickling in still, all I need you to do right now is draw your property boundary and any structures on your property. And we'll get to filling it in later. Hello, Lisa, welcome. we are just pulling out a piece of paper and a pencil, and we're just drawing our property boundaries and any structures on our property. Your house, a storage shed, a tree fort, any fun things. If you feel like you're done, give me a good thumbs up, and then I'll know I can move on. All right, great. Thank you, Raina. Thank you, Alex. All right, we'll give everybody a few more minutes. Okay. So don't worry if you're not completely done. I know some people have more artistic skills than others and like to make really beautiful drawings. So you will have the opportunity to continue improving your drawing over the next 10 minutes or so. So now what we're going to do is a photo hunt. And so keep your piece of paper near you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of photographs. And I want you to look at the photographs and think about, is there anything that I see in these photographs that might make it a little bit easier for that structure to catch on fire if there was a wildfire nearby? Okay. And I invite you to talk about it if you're hanging out with somebody in the room, or just go ahead and put your ideas in the chat. So what do you see for property 1, property 2, that if there was a wildfire nearby might increase the chances of that house igniting? The wood. Good. Thank you, Brenda. Very good. And feel free to put this in the chat. I'd love for everybody to feel the opportunity to participate. So if you'd like to, what do you see here? So what about the wood? Piles of logs and lumber. Yeah, lumber. So on the property 2, there's a bunch of dry lumber piled up against the house, some right up against in the faucet vent there. On the left, we've got a big pile of firewood that's right up against the house. So does anybody feel brave enough to unmute themselves and tell me why this might be a problem if there was a wildfire nearby?
I'll do that.
Thank you, Lisa.
The dried wood would catch on fire very easily because
Yeah.
because it's dry and
Exactly.
not wet.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Exactly. So we have firewood because we like to have fires in our homes and campfires and things like that. The thing is, when you stack up dried firewood up against your house, and if there's a wildfire nearby, then that's something that's pretty easy to burn. We know that. What about, is there anything, let's look at property 1. Is there anything that you see in property 1 that would prevent the house from catching on fire if there was a wildfire coming through? Go ahead and put your answers in the chat. I want to see lots and lots of answers in the chat. Gravel. Yes, thank you, Vicki. Very good. Yeah, the gravel's not going to burn. Rock doesn't burn. It's got to get pretty hot. It's not going to burn. What else? Anything else? Yes, thank you, David. Gravel instead of mulch. Very good. Mulch can burn. Wooden mulch, that's dried wood, right? That could catch on fire. The property is cleared, right? So we've got a well-maintained lawn. The trees are pretty far back away from the house. Very good. So there are some things in here that might need to be improved, like that the dry wood. It would be great to move that at least 30 feet away from the structure. However, the well-maintained lawn, the gravel around the base of the house, those are great things. Those are going to prevent the house from igniting. So now take a look at your maps. And if you have something that looks like this in your yard, I want you to draw it in. That means if you have a pile of dried wood a little bit too close to your structure, certainly within 5 feet, but ideally we want those about 30 feet away from the house. So if you have something like that in your yard, go ahead and draw it in and note it, and maybe put a little X or some notation that indicates that might not be a great thing to have right there. But also, if you have some gravel around your structure or well-maintained lawn, go ahead and put that in. You could just put it as an annotation, like green lawn, and put a check or a happy face, just to show that you've got some great stuff going on in there as well. And so just as an example, here I have, I've used red and green. If you have red and green, that's great, but you could just use a pencil, that's fine too. But noted where there might be a wood pile up against the house that I've noted in red that I want to move. And then I've got some rock mulch in the sidewalk here, that's not gonna burn, so I put that in green. Okay, this one's a little trickier. So property 1 and property 2, so I'm gonna say, focus on property, well, both of them have something in common. So go ahead and put in the chat, if there was a wildfire in the area, is there anything that you see in these photographs that might increase the chances of any structures nearby this vegetation igniting? There's a hint there. Low-hanging fruits. What do you mean by that, Vicki? Dry vegetation and juniper. Yeah, so property 2, the stuff down here is juniper. Yeah, over here, Brian, remind me what this is, this plant down here, some dried out stuff. Got a big evergreen, and this evergreen is the limbs are coming down into this vegetation on the ground, right? Yeah, the limbs are close to the ground.
I believe there's
Yes,
some rosemary there and some ivy.
Yeah, so here down here you've got
old
some
shrub.
rosemary, ivy. And then what is this tree back here called? Do you remember?
That is a cypress.
Cypress. Yes. Very good. Okay, so dry grassy shrubs and plants. Yeah, the cypress. Did I somehow mute myself? Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Okay, yeah, so you've got some dried shrubs down here, and you've got this, the cypress up here as well. Over here you've got juniper, and you have some limbs. And so the problem here is that this vegetation down on the ground is really flammable, right? So juniper, if you look underneath of there, it's just a bunch of dried dead wood. Rosemary is really flammable as well. And so those plants in themselves are flammable. Now, I'm not a plant expert, if you can tell by me, asking Brian what these plants are. So when I think about plants and vegetation that are flammable, I just use the rule of thumb that if it's really fragrant, it's likely flammable. So rosemary, juniper, pine, conifers, lavender, those types of plants are really fragrant. If you, squish them between your fingers, they have a really great smell, sage, things like that. The reason they smell so fragrant is because they're full of oil. And because they're full of oil, they can ignite very easily and burn really fast. The second problem here is that you've got these limbs, these trees. In this case, this is a pretty flammable tree. In this case, maybe that's not such a flammable tree, but in both cases, you've got these limbs that are stretching down into this flammable material that's down on the ground. And the problem there is that that can create a fire ladder. So if this, in property 1, if this ignites down here, then it wouldn't take very much for the fire to race up and catch that tree on fire, and now you've got a canopy fire, right? Now you've got a fire up in the tree, and that's really close to those homes. And so the idea here is that if you can clean that up a little bit and limb up the trees, so for the cypress, be about 10 feet up off the ground, 10 feet away from the structure, and just make sure there's no continuity of fuel from the ground up into these trees. That would be really helpful. And here's the recommendation that the bushes should be 3 times the height of the bush separated from the limbs of the tree for your, yeah. Okay. What about these? We'll say if you, let's see, how can I do this? How can I break you up a little bit? So if you have a last name that starts with an A through a G, do property 1. If you have a last name that goes from G to S, do property 2. And if you have a last name that's T through Z, do property 3. So we can split it up a little bit. We'll split up the work. So A through G, do property 1. H through S, property 2. T through Z, property 3. Thanks, Brian. And go ahead and let me know what you see in these in the chat. Again, that might increase the chances of these structures igniting or prevent them from igniting. Oh, and I should say, if you have things like this in your yard, if you didn't get it from the first time, keep mapping these into your yard as well. So if you see that you've got ladder fuels in your yard, you might want to mark that with an X. Or if you're like, yeah, I've got some bushes, but they're nowhere near the limbs of that tree, go ahead and put a smiley face because that's awesome. Got to celebrate the wins, right? Okay, so property 1, very good. Yeah, these trees are right up against the house. They're very flammable, right up beneath the soffit here. Very good. See, number 2, we've got these trees that come right down to the ground. They're right up between the houses here. So these are also really flammable. And so in either of these cases, if these catch on fire, then you're going to have direct flame very, very close, or in the case of property, run right up against the house, right? So that's what you want to avoid. Very good. And then property 3 is a little trickier. Let's see. Lots of lavender in the yard. Yes. And anything about that lavender in particular that's concerning? Lavender, oh, good job, Carolyn. Lavender leading right up to the house, right? And so we talked about flammable plants are usually the ones that are really fragrant. So in this case, lavender is beautiful, but it's very, very flammable. So having this lavender continuous all the way up to the house is a problem. Now if the homeowner just removed this from at least 5 feet from the house and then spread these out a little bit, you don't have to remove all the lavender, right? But you do need to space it out so that you don't have an opportunity for fuel to be continuous in your yard. And you certainly don't want it within 5 feet of the structure. Kelly, would you like to share your story from the Alameda fire about the home that had vegetation, something like this between the houses?
Yeah, so in the first 15 minutes of the fire, after I had assigned all of our Ashland resources, which we don't have that many, and there was a lot of fire and only a few firefighters, I took a walk into the Quiet Village neighborhood that was most threatened by the wave of fire that was coming. And as I'm walking down, I believe it was Glendower Street, there was between 2 homes, kind of like property 2, only a little closer to the street, there was a bunch of really like beautiful manzanita, like low growing shrub. You know, it's kind of neat to see all the curvy wood in it, but manzanita is one of our oily woods. It burns hot and fast. And that little privacy screen of that manzanita had caught on fire from an ember that had blown onto it. And it just went up. As I'm walking by, it goes up fast. And with the wind, it created one of these new phenomenons, like a fire tornado, only it was swirling horizontally between the homes and was going to catch the homes beyond that on fire. And in that moment, as I'm looking at that and thinking, okay, now we're going to start losing homes, I got to make sure people are out of there, I looked up the street and a fire engine was just coming down the street toward me, and I knew the crew that was on it. I knew the exact engine. I hadn't called for it to be there because I had assigned everybody, but it happened to show up right at that moment. And I was like, well, obviously you guys need to go here and put this out. And they went to work and did it. So it happened pretty fast. And I think we got lucky on that because of the timing on it. But had those trees not been there, it wouldn't have been such a desperate situation, I think.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, so again, if you have anything that looks like this in your yard, so any kind of flammable vegetation that's right up against the house, or maybe between your 2 houses and it's not spaced out, go ahead and put that in your map with maybe like a little X. And if you have some vegetation like this, but it's spread out across, and it's not within 5 feet of your house, maybe it's out in the front yard and you just have 1 juniper plant, or not juniper, sorry, you don't want that. 1 lavender plant here, maybe 1 lavender plant 7 feet away, that's great, right? So you've got them spaced out in your yard. They're not, they're further than 5 feet from your house. And you can just put a little smiley face there because that's okay. All right. Moving on. So this is just some information here for you for some particularly flammable plants. So certainly anything that's coniferous is very flammable. These long grasses, these tall grasses can be pretty flammable as well. And so you really want to reduce those in your yard. I live in Boise, Idaho, and I'm constantly battling cheatgrass on my back hill and Russian ryegrass as well. So I have to constantly get up there and pull it out before it seeds or knock it down with a line trimmer, things like that. And then other types of plants that might be problematic, fragrant plants, sage, lavender, things like that. And then this I actually learned from Brian, but bamboo is also quite flammable. I don't see a lot of bamboo in Boise, but you might have some in Ashland. Okay, very good. What about this house? I'll do it. It's just one picture. Is there anything that you see in this yard around this house that might either increase or decrease its chances of catching on fire? Now, I know it's a little bit difficult to see in the picture, so I will tell you that there's a deck. It's a wooden deck. It looks to me, at least, there's not a lot of debris under the deck. That's great, right? So we don't see, if I look under there, I don't see leaves and things like that. However, this is wooden mulch that's in the yard, and the wooden mulch does appear to go under the deck. Yes, thank you, Vicki. Yep, so this is wooden mulch. Why is wooden mulch a problem? Anybody feeling brave? It's just dry wood chips, so yeah, it can catch on fire pretty easily. Yes, it burns. Thank you, Lisa. You're my brave soul tonight.
Yeah, even though the the shrubs aren't necessarily touching, they're all very flammable.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then once it gets into the wood chips would spread it from shrub to shrub, and then create altogether it would be quite sort of a firewall. Not a firewall, it would be a wall of fire.
Yeah.
And those shrubs, I can't tell if it's conifers that are right up against, there's a couple of big spruce are right up against the deck.
Yeah.
But the others are close enough, and the wood chips are going to spread. And yeah. So even though it looks like pretty nicely trimmed and everything, it's only the appearance that it's good.
Yeah, thanks, Priscilla. That was really good. And so they're getting there in a sense that their bushes aren't continuous, but they are too close. They're still too close in this picture. They've got these small conifer trees right up against the deck, and we know that's not good. And then any hot embers from the fire landing in this mulch is going to ignite the mulch. And you've got all of this flammable vegetation in the yard as well. And if it ignites the mulch, it's beneath this deck.
Are you sure that's mulch? Because it looks like rocks to me.
Yeah, I know it's really hard to see, but in this case, it is wooden mulch.
Okay.
So if it were rock, it would not be a problem. Okay, so there's a good question. If it was rock, would this be a problem?
Probably not as much.
Probably not as much. However,
but the bushes would still burn.
Yeah, those bushes are still a little bit too close together, and these are right up against the house too. So,
and those bushes are going to grow. They're going to grow and spread and fill in everything, and those things next to the steps are going to get big.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. That's another good point, is that vegetation maintenance, you don't just do it once, right? You have to continually trim back your vegetation and make sure that it's spread out because it grows. Very good.
So, Brittany, may I say a couple of things?
Of course.
Yeah, my name is Steve Thorpe, and like Cheryl Padilla, who just spoke, we both live in Mountain View Estates, which is in Talent, and both our places did get burned out. It's a manufactured home senior park in the Alameda fire. And so we are part of a Firewise group that's starting up here and working with the local fire officials and others to prepare. And so a couple of things about this particular image here, this home and setting. One is underneath that deck, even though it does look pretty clean, and that's great, we've been advised put wire mesh up to prevent leaves from gathering under there. Because the day of the Alameda fire, the wind was blowing 45 miles an hour. And I actually had gone out first thing that morning and cleaned out leaves on one side of the house. And by the time I started cleaning leaves on the other side, leaves had gathered again on the first side of the house. So leaves are just blowing around everywhere. And so our fire officials are telling us to prevent those from gathering underneath a porch or steps or whatever, to put wire mesh up.
Absolutely.
To keep them out. And then in regards of the mulch, the discussion, sometimes people ask, well, can I have bark, which doesn't catch fire as easily, versus mulch? And the fire officials are telling us don't have either one, that the bark is harder to start, but once it does burn, it burns longer and hotter. And the mulch itself is easier to catch. And the problem on the day of the Alameda fire was that there were showers of embers. The fire officials just could not keep up with the intensity of the wind blowing these showers of embers. And so it took almost nothing for these embers to catch something on fire as these showers of embers came along. So your advice about the particular types of plants and then spreading them out is really good. And then really having no bark and no mulch. So they're saying rocks everywhere instead of mulch or bark.
Yes. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your story. And I'm so sorry to hear about your homes in that fire.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, that's really great advice. And so just to think about like what kind of spacing you would want. In this case, it would be better for, as Steve mentioned, to enclose the bottom of that porch, and so that it's easier to maintain, right? There's a co-benefit there, is you don't have to continually clean it out all year long, but also if there's a wind-blown fire, you're not getting debris blowing underneath your deck. So that's fantastic advice. And then also replacing this wood mulch with rock mulch, at least within 5 feet of the porch and under the porch, at least. And then also spacing out the vegetation, making sure you don't have any of the flammable vegetation right up against the home. But if you do, beyond 5 feet from the home, if you do have some of these bushes, they need to be spaced out a bit more. So the recommendation is that 2 feet, the height, twice the height of the bush is how far you want to have them spaced out. And again, you know, you don't really want them up against the house, and you just want to reduce that continuity of potential fuels. Brian?
But just for clarity on the spacing, that picture is showing 2 foot tall, 4 foot wide, is twice the height of a shrub should be the distance between the shrub. It's not quite clear enough in the photos. I just wanted to be sure that if it was a 3 foot shrub, it would be a 6 foot spacing. So that's where that twice the height for the width of spacing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yep, twice the height of the shrub. Perfect. Okay. So again, you might have something that looks like this in your yard, right? So you don't have to get rid of all your vegetation, but you do need to space it out. Nothing within 5 feet of the house should be flammable, but beyond that, just make sure your vegetation is well spread out if you have anything that's flammable, like a bush or lavender or sage. Okay. What about this one? I only have about 4 more left, and then we're going to move on to talking about how fire works and why this is important. So just to give you a little heads up of what's coming up. Any issues with this yard here? And we can put this, yes, and to answer Vicky's question, all of my materials are available to you, my slides, the recording tonight, we're going to make all of this available for you in a Google Drive. So don't let me end without giving you the link, and I'll also email it to you. Okay, so
there's a wooden
good,
fence.
Brenda. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The wooden fence is old and hasn't been kept up, and it's got weeds growing up it all over the yard.
Yeah, this is
an
ugly side yard.
It comes up right to the house.
Yes. Yes.
There's a connection between the fence and the house.
Yep, exactly. So both Cheryl, Lisa, thank you so much. So you're seeing the right thing. One, there's some dried vegetation down here. That's not so good. It's coming right up to this wood paneling. And then there's this old wooden fence here as well. And so the recommendation isn't that you can have wood fences, but the idea is that you don't want the wood fence to be within 5 feet of your structure. So in this case, that means the soffit up here. So I would want this part of the fence to be metal, maybe a chain link fence, and then beyond that, you can have a wood fence. But you just don't want that wood fence coming right up against your house. So this is what it looks like now, which is not, a lot nicer. Got a broken wheelbarrow here and some rock mulch, and I turned this little sandbox into a garden. This is my side yard, just for full honesty. And I have cleaned it up, but note that I haven't dealt with the fence yet. And that's because it takes some time to sometimes be able to afford those types of upgrades. So I know that sometimes when you're looking at this and thinking about your yard, it's easy to start feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I have so much to do. Just remember that every one step you take makes you that much safer. So you can think of preparedness as a ladder, and every step you take up on the ladder makes you that much safer and more prepared for wildfire. So again, I've been able to get into my yard, clean it up some, but I haven't been able to save up enough yet to replace that fence. But it's on my list, right? It's something that I'm planning to do in the future, hopefully the near future, because it is kind of old and run down fence. Okay, some other things that we see here that are
I have
good.
a question.
Yeah, Priscilla, go ahead.
So, when I see things like this and I think, it looks like the siding is wood.
Mm-hmm.
And do the distances and the plants change if it was hardy plank siding? That's a little bit less flammable. And so, like you said, every little bit helps. Like, which would you, in this case, if you only had so much money, which would you do? Would you, replace the siding that's most exposed to the fence, for instance, or would you replace the fence?
It's a great question. And I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves. Okay. It'll come down to the cost and your own values and your own priorities, right? So for me to answer that question, I'm probably going to do the fence first, because to me, it's the lower hanging fruit. I would have to look in to see how much it would cost to replace the siding. And as we'll see in a little bit, at least having 6 inches of non-combustible siding at the bottom would be ideal. I don't think there's any changes to the recommendations of nothing flammable within 5 feet of your house, regardless of what your house's structure is made out of. But for me, I'm going to do the fence first and then look into the siding. That's a really good question.
That makes sense, because if your fence goes, if your fence isn't going up in flames, then whether your house is which kind of siding doesn't matter as much. What I was trying to think of was, in my house, we've done some work. We had an assessment. We've done some work. We're in pretty good shape, but we wouldn't get a perfect score. But like where I feel like where we're most vulnerable is a row of cypress that's at a neighbor's that's close. And so I think in my mind, and maybe Brian, you could weigh in on this a little bit, like, is my, if I could only do one thing, would I concentrate on that side of my house where the cypress is, because I can't control my neighbor's cypress, for example. And so there's, I guess I'm thinking in a way of prioritizing the work.
Yeah, you really want to prioritize based on the highest risk first. A lot of it is debris maintenance first and foremost. So that should be your kind of number one thing to target, because it's also the easiest thing to do is to remove the debris. From there, cutting fine fuels, because you want to remove anything that can ignite really quickly the fastest. Remove that first. The bigger things like trees, fences, wood siding, those cost more, and they also take more time to plan. So that's where you're strategizing those things out while you're dealing with those first easier wins. And that includes talking to the neighbors, see if they can do anything about the tree or if they would let you prune it up. But otherwise, once you get into bigger cost items and larger projects, that's where you might be considering hardening that one side of the home next to that tree, because you're upgrading siding on only one home because of your budget, or fixing the windows on that side, or putting fire shutters on those windows. But those are much higher cost items and usually require contractors or handymen to do them if you're not so good with a hammer and nail yourself. So, but at the fire station, we have volunteers and myself who can help you work through those strategies and priority lists. So always feel free to reach out to the fire department if you have questions in that process.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you so much, Priscilla and Brian. So, okay, I'm going to fly through the next couple just because for time, we have a lot to cover still, but some things that you might not think about. And these are some of the reasons why you might want to sign up for one of those free wildfire home risk assessments that you can get through the City of Ashland. Because when I had my free wildfire home assessment, these are the things that the firefighter caught that I didn't see, that I've got some peeling paint, and that's a great place for an ember to get stuck in. I did have, and I was lucky to have 1/8 to 1/8 inch screening on my intake valves, and not intake valves, what are these called? Intake vents in your home, air vents. And so anything like this, you want to have a minimum of 1/18 screen metal mesh behind so that you don't get embers sucked up into your attic, or 1/16 is even better. So those are some things to think about. This one's probably kind of obvious, that if you have this dried vegetation up on your roof, well, this might be a Class A roof, which is pretty fire resistant, but those leaves are going to catch on fire really quickly. Some things to think about as well. Gutter guards are a nice way to protect your home. This doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything on your roof, because leaves will still collect on top of those gutter guards. You still need to clear those off, but at least you're keeping the leaves from getting into your gutters. And you have a co-benefit of your gutters not getting clogged so often either. So again, just remember those screening, some gutter guards, and you're probably going to need to get up on your roof a couple of times throughout fire season to make sure that it's cleared off. So the deck, coming back to Steve's point about the decks, certainly it'd be great to have decks that were made out of more hardened material, things that aren't as flammable, but also remember that what's on and beneath your deck is just as important as what the deck is made out of. And so in these cases, one thing that would be really helpful is just making sure that you keep beneath the deck clear. So if you don't have time or the funds to replace your deck just yet, you can take some actions that are still going to protect your home, like making sure that you have nothing flammable beneath the deck. Better yet, as Steve pointed out, enclosing the deck. So here's an example of a screen mesh that's keeping material from getting underneath the deck. And also remember that some of your furniture on your deck might be flammable. And so keep that in mind. If there is a wildfire threat, you want to get that flammable furniture off your deck as well. Now, I have heard that they are making some lacquer type sprays for decks and fences that are getting more effective. However, they break down. And so just because you spray it once doesn't mean that it's fire resistant. You're going to have to look at the product and see what frequency you would have to treat your materials. So that's something else to keep in mind. So this is an example of a FireWise home where you've got the way the home is made. You've got Class A roof and metal gutters, metal gutter guards. There's 5 feet of non-combustible material right up against the house. So here you can see they have a wooden fence, but the fence within 5 feet of the house is chain link. And they do have some mulch out here, which is away from the home, but it's not right up against the home. And also they have this non-combustible siding, which is also recommended. But again, as Brian pointed out, like, do the easy things first. Really maintain the vegetation, get that flammable material away from your home. Those are some of the best things you can start with. And you might have to plan out for some of these more complicated, more expensive, and time-consuming tasks, which we will have a chance to do later. Okay, and then just to think about FireWise landscaping, I'm not saying remove all the vegetation from your yard. In fact, FireWise landscaping is quite beautiful. And so if you haven't checked it out, we have a FireWise garden in Idaho that has a really nice website. There's some nice materials on the City of Ashland website with recommendations for FireWise plants. They tend to also be low water plants, which is great because you don't have to water them so much. And you can really produce some really beautiful landscaping. So just remember, nothing flammable, fuel-free zone within 5 feet of the house. Beyond that, you want your vegetation spread out. so no continuous fuels. Yeah, and you can use some of these plants. Thank you. And Kelly is putting some of the resources that the City of Ashland provides in the chat. All right, so at this point, you've got a map of your home. You've got a sense of some things that you might want to improve, some things that you're doing really well on. But remember that the City of Ashland also offers free home wildfire risk assessments. And so if you'd like to sign up for one of those, you can do that on the City of Ashland website, and Kelly will put the link directly in the chat if you want to sign up for one of those. I recommend it. It's kind of fun. Okay, so now let's talk about how fire works. Right? Why are we so worried about this flammable stuff around our home? Is it a wall of fire coming at us? How are you going to stop a wall of fire? Well, the thing is that it's usually not the wall of fire, that you have embers that can blow in from more than a mile away from the fire front, and more than half of home ignitions start because hot embers land in flammable vegetation or flammable material around your home. Wildfire in itself is a natural process. It's a natural part of our ecosystem. It's healthy. It's actually necessary for our forests to burn. It clears out dead vegetation. It renews the soil. And so it's really important. But the problem is that as a society, we tend to grow up into those beautiful foothills and into that wildland vegetation area. And so the City of Ashland, you can see here, does have some neighborhoods that are growing up into what we call the wildland urban interface, where you have homes that are growing right up into that wildland vegetation that burns, that does tend to burn, right? And so this is a map of the City of Ashland, so you can see the city outline here. This comes from wildfirerisk.org. And it's a great website. You can go and put in any address, any city. I think it's not an address, it's city-based, and get a sense of the fire risk. They have different types of maps you can look at. This map, the reason I like this map is because it shows you two different zones, the direct exposure zone and the indirect exposure zone. So the direct exposure zone is where you have parts of the city that have grown up into that wildland urban interface, that wildland vegetation that tends to burn on a natural cycle. However, the orange is the indirect exposure. And so these are the places where those homes are not right up against the wild vegetation. However, the vegetation is close enough that if it does ignite, you can have embers blowing into the city, and those embers can catch things on fire. Those embers can catch flammable things on fire, like piles of firewood, leaves in your gutter, juniper, or flammable plants. Okay. So this is a video, and again, as I mentioned before, embers are responsible for more than half of home ignitions. So this is a video created from the IBHS Research Center. I'm going to turn the sound off. And essentially, what they do is they've created a lab structure. So they've got this big warehouse. They put up a structure, and what you see is that you've got a screen over this window. You've got some mulch, some wooden mulch along the base. You've got metal gutters up here. I believe they're metal gutters, but they're full of dried vegetation, so leaves and sticks and things. So you see this ember storms. They produce an ember storm in the lab. They blow the embers at the house. And what you'll notice is that here the embers are catching on the screen, but they're not catching the screen on fire. They're landing on the roof, but they're not catching the roof on fire. But what catches fire, which you'll see as this continues, and quite quickly, here you're starting to see a bit of a flame. So this flammable vegetation, that now you've got the mulch is on fire here. Now you've got the leaves in the gutter are on fire. And now there is flame directly against the structure, right? Not the structure that's catching on fire. It's the flammable stuff around the structure that catches on fire. So if you advance the video a little bit more here, you'll see that now you've got direct flame up against the house. The gutters are starting to burn off the house, and now you've got fire burning up into the attic. Okay, so this is why it's so important to maintain your vegetation, to keep all that flammable stuff away from your house, because it's that flammable stuff that ignites. And once it ignites, then your house has a much greater chance of igniting. Okay, so how wildfires become disasters. So we've all heard about the red flag warnings. Keep your ears out for those. Those are really important days. This is when you have low humidity, super hot, dry vegetation, and high winds. On these days, you want to be exceptionally careful out there, okay? Because what can happen is if you get a spark, either because you've got a fire in your backyard, or maybe you're trimming plants with a metal weed whacker or something like that, that can spark. Or in this case, you can have a car that just kind of pulls off the road into some tall vegetation, and the driver might not realize that the underside of the car is hot enough to actually ignite that vegetation, and now you've got a fire by the highway, whatever it is, right? So how wildfires become disasters is you have the really bad days, those really bad conditions. NOAA will release a red flag warning on those days. Then you have an ignition. And if you have unprepared homes where you've got flammable vegetation right up against the homes, then you've got firefighters that are out there trying to put out the fire front, but also trying to protect the homes at the same time. And they quickly get overwhelmed, the resources get overwhelmed, and that can lead to disaster. However, if you can interrupt that cycle by preparing your homes, then the firefighters can more effectively respond to the fire front, put the fire out faster, and save homes. So you can save your homes. So I want to share with you a message from Jerry McAdams. He was a City of Boise fire captain for a long time and a wildfire mitigation specialist. He's now retired, but he has a consulting firm and works with cities on their CWPPs, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And he actually is your consultant for your City of Ashland Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan, Protection Plan. Oh, wait for me. But we created this video with him a few years ago, and it's a really empowering message that I wanted to share with you. And let me know, somebody give me a thumbs up.
I'm a wildfire mitigation specialist with the Boise Fire Department, and in my view, homeowners are really critical. They're a first line of defense. What they do matters greatly. And so if a homeowner can make their home survivable to where we don't have to feel like we have to protect that home and we can actually put out the fire sooner, that protects homeowners. It keeps the fire from growing and threatening more homes, more homeowners, and more firefighters. If we get a good wind-blown fire, you're going to have embers landing around your home up to a mile away from the fire front. Or even several roads into a neighborhood are affected by ember intrusion and that kind of thing, right? We had the 8th Street fire, and there was one home that ended up burning, and it was because they had an arborvitae bush right up underneath a soffit vent. And so an ember landed in that arborvitae, got the arborvitae going right up underneath that soffit vent, which burned up into the attic of that house and burnt the roof off of the house. That is the only thing that caused that house to ignite, was that one single arborvitae bush that was in the wrong spot, for that home. That homeowner could have protected their home by making sure that they didn't have any flammable vegetation right up against their home, but they probably weren't aware, right? And so it's really important that homeowners gain some awareness and some understanding of those ignition vulnerabilities and what will cause problems for them during a wildfire event. We're all in this together, right? Wildfire is everyone's fight. So we're working together in a partnership. Homeowners are doing their part, hardening their home, doing proper vegetation management to where their homes can be standalone, survivable, and then wildland firefighters and firefighters in general can do their job, get the fire put out sooner, which threatens less homes, less lives, less property.
Now I want to give you just a couple of minutes to look at your map and write down a few ideas of things you would like to do in your yard. It's going to give you 2 minutes to do this, and we're going to continue this at the very end. But I want to make sure that you get a chance right now when you're thinking about this, the embers landing and that flammable stuff around your house. And take a few minutes to make a list of some things that you see in your map that you might want to improve. Don't forget about that flammable patio furniture. Right, I have just a few more things to share with you, and then we're going to finish with our action planning. All right, so just something to keep in mind, engage your neighbors. You can have a neighborhood block party where you can share some of this information. Even just leading by example is a great thing to do. So sometimes it's awkward to talk to your neighbors about, oh, you got this cypress that's kind of coming over into my yard and things. But sometimes if you can just lead by example and talk about what you're doing and why you're doing it, it can be really effective. And if you do want a neighborhood specific module like this, if you would like somebody to lead a workshop like this for your neighborhood, that can be a really effective way to bring your neighbors together and talk about and normalize the conversation around wildfire. Okay, so the final thing I want to hit before we go is preparing for an evacuation. I'm going to just do this real fast. So, but there's lots of resources for you on the City of Ashland website. So the idea is, how can you prepare for an evacuation ahead of time? What do you need to take with you? And how will you learn about evacuation orders? So Oregon follows the Ready, Set, Go program, which has been updated to Be Ready, Be Set, and Go Now, which kind of means the same thing. But be ready means to prepare for an evacuation. This is, maybe there's a danger in the area, maybe it's not directly threatening your home yet, but there's a wildfire in the area. If the wind conditions change, you never know, right? So in this case, how are you going to find out about this? So the first thing you're going to want to do is opt in to Ashland Alerts, which is your alert system. So this is how your emergency managers and fire officials are going to let you know about a threat in your area. Another thing you'll want to do is know your zone. So if you don't know your fire zone yet, make sure you look that up. That's also on the City of Ashland website, and Kelly's going to put it into the chat as well. So before you leave tonight, sign up for Ashland Alerts and make sure you know your zone, because they'll come across and say zone 2 evacuate. The other thing to get in mind, or to take into account under ready, is to gather your things. So in the case that you might need to evacuate, think about these things. People, so where are your people going to be? You might want to make a plan if you're going to be separated at work or at school. Prescriptions, make sure you have any necessary medical prescriptions for at least a week. You never know, but you might just want to take what you have. Papers, so we have some resources on important documents that you might want to gather in the case that you need to evacuate, like passports, titles, things like that. In the Google Drive I'll share with you, we have a nice list of documents you might want to think about. Just go ahead and put those in a folder right now. I actually have mine in a fireproof folder that you can buy on Amazon, which I can just grab and take with me when I'm ready to go. Personal needs, these are things like some food, some water, some blankets, some extra clothes, your favorite running shoes, whatever it is that you want to bring with you. Things for your pets, so make sure you've got the crates packed, some food and water for your pets. And then any priceless items, anything that you would really not want to lose, like those heirlooms or photo albums, things like that. So this is what you do during ready. During set in level 2, this is when you might need to be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice. Maybe something has changed. Maybe the fire might be a little bit closer to threatening you directly. So in this case, back your car into the driveway, make sure you have a full tank of gas, load it up, be ready to go in case you need to go. Some other things to keep in mind: turn on some lights inside and outside to make your home more visible. Close all your windows, vents, and doors. Move your flammable furniture to the interior of the home. Turn off your air conditioning. And if you do have the time, you might just want to take some pictures of the rooms in your home just in case the worst happens. Also, know how to open your garage door if the power goes out. So probably all of us know how to do that. Maybe teach your kids how to open the garage door if the power goes out. Some ideas that maybe some folks in Paradise were stuck in their garages because the power went out and they didn't know how to get the garage door open without the power. So this is set. Now, if at any point during this you just feel like you need to go, you can just go. You don't have to wait to be told to go. If you feel like you need more time to evacuate, or if you just feel like you need to go, that's okay. You can just go. Go is go. Go is go now. It's not 20 minutes to gather your things. It's you need to leave the area immediately. And just some things to keep in mind: keep your windows up, turn on that little circulation button in your car so that you keep cleaner air in your car. But you have to go right now. This is not a moment to gather things and check in with your neighbors. Well, go ahead and check in here. Make sure your neighbors are leaving too. But otherwise, you need to get out, because if you don't, you might not make it out. Okay, that's really important. Okay, So making sure, oh, we've got 1 minute left, folks. 1 minute left in the workshop. So the final thing, I sent you all via email a table. And I think even if we don't have time to finish this together right now, I empower you to do this tonight. Go ahead and fill out this table with the task. When are you going to do it? How much is it going to cost? Write down specifically how this is going to protect you and your family and your property. And then are there any non-fire related benefits to taking this action? Again, like the gutter guard, well, that keeps your gutters from clogging up, right? So that's great. I would suggest putting the easy, fast things on the list first. So for example, I just went ahead and said, I'm going to sign up for the Ashland alerts and know my zone. You could get that done tonight and go ahead and check things off your list. But some things you might need to plan out for, like, well, maybe this weekend I can get my family together. We'll make a plan for an evacuation in the case we need to evacuate. Maybe the first Saturday of the month is when I'll clear out the gutters and things like that. So those are just some examples on this, but I want to give you some time to ask questions. If you need this, let me know. I'll put a link in the chat so you can download it really quickly. It's also in your email. And I'd recommend filling this out and putting it on your fridge, right? So, and starting to get some things done. So with that, that's all we have, but I see there's been some great questions in the chat. I encourage you to read through some of those because Brian and Kelly have been doing a great job answering those in real time. We're also happy to answer your questions. And we would love if you wouldn't mind filling out a post-workshop questionnaire just to let us know how we did and how we might be able to improve the workshop in the future. So with that, thank you so much for your attention, and I'd be happy to take some questions.
So I don't understand. I know what my zone is, but I don't understand what good that does me because what does it tell me? I mean, it tells me I'm in zone 10, so big deal. So what am I supposed to get from knowing that I'm in zone 10?
It's a great question.
So I can respond to that, and it's a great question, right? So the trouble is that we can't schedule, nor can we predict exactly what the event's going to look like, right? When we get the event, we're kind of to the subject of like where it's going to travel first, second, like it's going to decide that based on our winds, right? And if you've lived in the Rogue Valley for a little bit of time, you have some idea of like what the winds are normally. I'll try to loop you back in. So if you get a fire that's say the Almeida fire on the northwest end of town, and we wanted just the Quiet Village area to evacuate, which would be zone 10. Then those would be the folks that would be in the most danger, in the most harm's way, and we would say, hey, zone 10, go now. All the other zones, we might say, be set, because at this point we know the wind, I don't know if everybody can see us right here, the wind's just going to keep blowing that way, which is away from the rest of the town. So we wouldn't necessarily want all zones evacuated. Does that kind of make sense?
Well, so somebody's going to contact me and say, if zone 10 is asked to leave now, somebody's going to contact me and tell me that?
Yeah, best case scenario is that yours truly is right here, ready to send out messages and knows exactly where the fire is going to go so that I can give you that earliest warning. That warning piece, those emergency alerts are critical in your decision-making process. I would encourage you as well to have backups for that. So know ahead of time, like Dr. Brand recommended, when do we have red flag days? Those are scary days. I'm a big tough firefighter, but on days where the east wind is blowing kind of hot down through town in the morning, the hackles on my neck go up. I don't like it. So those are the days I'm more aware. Those are the days that I'm ready to go as well. So instead of waiting for little old me to tell you, hey, be set on this day, or hey, go now, you just go ahead and do that and talk to your family too and say, today's not a great day. The winds are high, it's hot out, it's late August. We're going to keep getting days like this, and it really falls on us to put as many redundant systems in as possible to become more reliant on that, reliant on ourselves and reliant on each other. I think one of the other points was, we want a little more verification when we're thinking about going, right? So, we want that emergency message. Well, what happens if the emergency messages go down? We've seen that happen. Okay, well, how well do I know, my closest family members? How well do I know my neighbors? What are they doing right now? So on days like that, that's time for us to get some muscle memory,
attention.
how we behave on those days, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. And so
Yeah, yeah.
the zones are
Okay.
broken up because we don't always know if it's, it may be the whole town, maybe. Let's never have it happen. Let's cross our fingers on that. But it may just be one or two zones, and hopefully never, but let's just be ready just in case.
Okay. Okay. So I need to take some responsibility and pay attention.
Yeah, we all do.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. That's why it's super important to sign up for those alerts. Those are an
Yep,
opt-in
I already
system.
have.
Gold star, Lisa.
Yep.
Good job. Nice job. Other questions?
So Brittany, may I make a couple of other suggestions? This is Steve again.
Yeah. Hi, Steve. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and one suggestion for all of us is believe it can happen because invariably, all of us, my wife and I, when we closed the doors that day, when we had to escape right at the last minute, we were convinced, oh, we'll be back in 2 or 3 hours. And everyone we've talked to had the same thing. They just thought, okay, we see the line, the fire line where the firefighters are there, but that shower of embers, that wind was so strong that that defeated the efforts to hold the line. The result of that statement is be prepared, because and believe that it can happen. So don't just assume, well, it's never happened to us before, it won't happen to us, and don't be too casual about all this preparation. The other part of that is the suggestion about taking photos and videos inside and outside your house is an excellent idea, because when it comes to recovery afterwards and insurance, et cetera, you really need that documentation. And I'm going to add one other piece: open closets, open drawers, cabinets, everything, and video and photo inside those, because it's hard to remember and document all those things. And so the more you can prepare, I mean, it sounds like it's just compulsive kind of preparation, but it really, we wish we had done that to be prepared for the aftermath. I'll just leave it at that.
Powerful message, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other questions? We have a question in the chat about small propane tanks. Any recommendations about small propane tanks?
Keep the valves closed when you're not using them, because the rubber lines to barbecue tanks or heaters can melt before the tank could even possibly explode. So keep valves closed whenever not using them. If they're in storage, keep them at least 30 feet away from your house, if at all possible, or store them in the garage where it could be better protected from embers or radiant heat.
Thank you. Great question. Okay, any other questions? Checking the chat here. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. I encourage you to use this next 20 minutes to go ahead and fill out that table. I love lists personally, and usually if I make a to-do list, the first thing I put on it is make my to-do list so that I can scratch something off really fast. Makes me feel like I did something. But again, put those easy things that are low-hanging fruit at the top of your list, and you're going to start getting your things done. If you have questions, the City of Ashland has a fantastic website with lots of materials. I'm also going to share this Google Drive that I put together with my slides and some additional materials. I will also put this recording in there once we are finished, so that you can share this with your friends. You can share the Google Drive with your friends and family and neighbors and whatnot. If you do want a neighborhood specific workshop, if you want to bring together like 12 of your buddies in your neighborhood, let us know. And don't forget that you can also sign up for those great home wildfire risk assessments. So thank you so much. Here's the link to the drive. I'll also email you all of this.
Thank you. Thank you guys for doing all this.
Thanks everybody so much. Thank you for sharing your stories and your questions and being engaged.
Brittany, someone just asked if neighborhood specific is available outside of Ashland.
I don't know.
We currently don't have anything outside of Ashland, but if it's in the Talent Phoenix area, the Firebrand Collective may be able to assist with a neighborhood event for you. If you reach out to us, we can get you that information for you. Otherwise, some of our volunteer risk assessors may be able to go out and do something for you as well. So please reach out to me.
Even in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Neighbors helping neighbors, right?
Great. I'll put Brian's email in the chat here too. Vicki, did we get to all your questions?
Yes, you got to my questions and I've taken lots of notes. Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.